Hey, everybody. This is John. I'm here with Charlie. Here for the Roundtable Jets podcast. And we're going to get right into it after a pretty busy trade deadline for the Jets. I don't think anybody really expected the moves that the Jets made to happen. I guess the biggest one, obviously, you could see Quinnen getting traded, but Sauce Gardner being dealt to the Colts for 2 first-round picks and A.D. Mitchell. I mean, Charlie, what did you think about that deal for the Jets?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, absolutely out of thin air. I mean, I don't think there was any chatter with, especially Sauce Gardner. That was something that not a lot of people saw coming, maybe even no one saw coming. But in the grand scheme of things, when you look at it in the big picture over the last 2 years, Quinnen Williams, and this goes for both Quinnen and Sauce Gardner, the two cornerstones of the Jets defense. It wasn't really working out. I mean, they had their best years, 22, 23 under Robert Saleh. Sauce, of course, for those first 2 years in the league, all-pro selections. But for whatever reason, with those two guys as your cornerstones of the defense, close to a bottom 10 in terms of total output, EPA per play. And it just seems like, when the Jets are in the position that they are, where, they're just working with next to nothing in terms of future draft capital, thanks to, being aggressive in the Rodgers era. They had to do something to kind of lay a foundation for the future. And I know it's the Jets and they, do this almost every 5 years, but you got to keep trying. You can't just fold the franchise and put our hands up and say, we're never going to be good. You got to try something.
Yeah, that's kind of how I took it too. I think you look at Sauce and it's evident that he's very good, and same with Quinnen. But I mean, and I spoke about this with a couple of friends of mine who are Jets fans. Like, what happened to the defense over the past few years? Because you look at the Jets and the offense isn't much better, so I'm not going to sit here and say it's great, but at least 2-3 years ago, you could say, well, this defense might be the best in football when it's at its best. And Sauce was obviously a big part of that. And then again, he's going to go to Indianapolis on a much better team, and he's probably going to enjoy himself a little bit winning games. But kind of as you said, like, you need a quarterback. And really at this point for the Jets, I think the Rodgers experiment was a good idea. He was probably their best quarterback in a very long time, probably even since Mark Sanchez, if we're being honest. But it didn't end as well as the Jets were hoping for. You really just have to kind of go back out there and go to the drawing board. And having as many picks as possible helps with that. And, it doesn't even have to be in this draft, right? If the Jets don't want to take someone this year, maybe you could package, this Colts pick with another future second or something, get a higher first for next year. There's a lot of different avenues the Jets can kind of go in to change that. And I kind of think that's what the front office was thinking with this one. I think, and even in Sauce's regard, I don't want to say he's regressed, but I wouldn't say that he was what he was his rookie and sophomore year. So that's something too that I think has to be factored in. And I think the reality of the situation, and unfortunate for maybe Jets fans who wanted him, is that, when you get offered 2 first-round picks and a decent young wide receiver with some potential, you kind of have to take it for a cornerback. This isn't you didn't trade a franchise quarterback or something like that. You traded a really good corner, and it stinks in the moment, but it kind of makes sense. So I think the Colts might have even overpaid, if anything, just because first-round picks in the NFL are so valuable. But it's obvious, too, that Indianapolis maybe thinks it has something going on over there with Jonathan Taylor and Daniel Jones, and the defense is pretty good. So it seems like it was kind of just a trade that made sense for both sides, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. And to what you said, it's a different conversation if we're sitting here saying, oh, the Jets, sold Sauce Gardner for pennies on the dollar. No, they got fantastic value. Like you said, I think the widespread agreement is that maybe even the Colts overpaid a little bit. So
yeah.
You don't see 2 first-round picks going for a cornerback, let alone a really good one. But at the end of the day, the Jets need they need scratch-offs, and a lot of them, and that's what those first-round, second-round picks are, and even A.D. Mitchell. So
yeah, I think that's kind of the big part too with me with the Jets is like you don't know, and if history continues to repeat itself, the Jets aren't exactly great at finding their guy in the draft, quarterback-wise. But every other position, like you look at the draft the past few years, they've been pretty decent draft-wise. So if you could figure out the quarterback position and you have, now 2 chances plus your own pick, so 4 chances over the next 2 years, it's like, well, this is a possibility to finally hit on something. Let's even say they finished with the 3rd highest pick this year or second, and the Saints are ahead of them, and you want Mendoza. You want Dante Moore, one of those two guys, but you tell, New Orleans, like, hey, we'll give you our first round pick for next year plus this one. You just have more flexibility. And I think you and I can both agree that if the Saints got that, unless they absolutely loved Mendoza or Moore, anybody's going to take the Jets first round pick with a rookie quarterback under center, because you have to assume it's probably going to at worst be a top 10 pick, unless that one of those guys comes in and just is that good. But now, kind of after tearing the team up yesterday a little bit, I would say, and you're probably going to lose Brees in the offseason, it seems like the Jets are destined. The unfortunate reality is that it'll probably be another 2-3 year thing here to build this back up. But if you can do that with the draft and the quarterback, then things look a lot brighter than they did yesterday, in my opinion. So, but that kind of takes us into our Quinnen Williams, segment here too. Send Quinnen to the Dallas Cowboys. Now, from the Cowboys' perspective, I'm a little questionable on it, and not because Quinnen isn't, very, very good, but you just traded one of the best defensive players in the NFL who's younger, and you had to give up some picks here in this trade. So I'm a little skeptical on it from the Cowboys' perspective, just because I know the defense is bad, but you just had, Micah Parsons. You don't really look like a playoff team at the moment. So it's tough to kind of understand what they're trying to do over there. But I do get the point of trying to fix the defense, and Quinnen will probably help with that.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, you led perfectly into it, because Quinnen Williams, I believe he's 27, going to be 28 real soon. And by the time the Jets do have the chance to possibly turn this thing around, he's going to be, looking for a new contract. He's going to be, on the back end of his prime. But yeah, for the Cowboys side of things, I mean, because you got Kenny Clark in the Micah Parsons trade, it didn't make a whole lot of sense to double down on the defensive line. It kind of felt like more they'd be in the edge rusher market heading to the deadline, because that's kind of the bigger need. But Jerry really wants to stop the run. Quinnen Williams is a elite run stopper, and he's going to help them. He's definitely going to raise the floor of that defense. But like you said, John, I don't know if this pushes them over the top into a playoff contender, let alone a Super Bowl contender. But and on a similar note of the Sauce Gardner trade, the Jets once again just got incredible value. A second-round pick in 2026, the better of the first-round picks in 27 between the Packers and the Cowboys. It's real hard to beat that value. And then, once again, similar to A.D. Mitchell, you got a former first-rounder in Mozzie Smith, who, obviously didn't play great in Dallas these last few years, but, get him in a new system, a fresh change of scenery. Who knows what could happen?
Yeah. And to kind of piggyback on Quinnen and his, defensive abilities, obviously he's, elite of the elite. And I'm a bit curious to kind of see how he looks in Dallas at getting to the quarterback. Now, I know he's more of a run stopper, and he's definitely not an edge rusher. But in 22, he had 12 sacks, and that was kind of like when that Jets defense just was all over you. They would lose games, 14-13 because the offense just couldn't do anything. So I'm a bit curious if maybe the Cowboys, were willing to give up that type of value and hope that he can get back to that 2022 form. Because right now he only had one sack in New York. It came in the first game of the year too against Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers. So he hasn't had a sack, in pretty much 2 months at this point. But from the Jets, again, like you said, when you get that type of value for a 27-year-old who's, going to be 28 here pretty soon, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to hold on to him, because you're not going to contend within the next 2 years. And even from his perspective, I think it's tough, because someone like Sauce might have been a little blindsided by the trade, and I think he even admitted that. But the reality here is, like, these guys probably want to win, especially after they were paid, like both of them. And you kind of did right by them in a sense by trading them to, two teams with a much better chance to win. I don't think Indianapolis and Dallas are Super Bowl contenders, but Indianapolis is playing well. The Cowboys are 3-5-1, and Dallas might be coming off its worst loss of the year on Monday night against the Cardinals. It was just kind of embarrassing. Jacoby Brissett essentially did whatever he wanted to do. And it seems like Jerry at that point was just like, all right, I can't even keep lying about this anymore. It's really just as bad as it looks. They gave up 44 to Bo Nix and the Broncos the week before that, 30 to the Panthers 2 weeks before that. So do I think Quinnen is going to be the guy who changes everything? I don't know if anybody really can in that defense right now without an entire, scheme change and multiple players. But I think he's as close as anybody that was on the market. I think if you look at the Jets' 2 trades, I mean, I think Gardner and Quinnen are better than Jalen Phillips, who I think is probably the third best player that was traded. So it looks like the Jets probably traded the two best players.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I saw something yesterday about how just like, especially in recent years, how many times have teams traded let alone multiple first-round picks, a first-round pick at the trade deadline. So just absolutely groundbreaking stuff yesterday.
Yeah. And then as we kind of look at some of these deals the Jets have made, I know the John Mechie edition came with a deal with the Eagles, actually, for Michael Carter. Now, Mechie is a tough player to evaluate in some sense. I know you looked at him. I think he was drafted 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, in the second round, high second round pick. You know, he's a guy who's at Alabama who you think like, hey, this could be the next Alabama wide receiver with a really good opportunity to be something in the NFL. He gets to the NFL. He's diagnosed with cancer. So it was just a really horrible situation. But I think there's also something to be said about him just continuing to play, continuing to show up and dealing with what he did. And, Aaron Glenn spoke about it. Like, he's the type of guy we want in the locker room. And I think the big thing for the Jets moving forward is this gave Glenn an opportunity to like really get his guys for the future. I think they gave him the blueprint of, hey, you'll have a chance to draft guys this year. We'll have free agency. Like, you're going to get your guys. And it seems like John Mechie might be one of them.
Yeah, definitely. And he, like you said, he fits that kind of mentality that Aaron Glenn's trying to bring to the Jets, trying to just overhaul the entire culture. Yeah, we'll see what he can do and what he can contribute to the offense in the back half of the season, especially with both Mitchell and Mechie. I mean, if one of these guys can come in and be, a number 3, number 4 for the next 2-3 years, that's a win. I mean, the Jets receiver room right now is just abysmal. I mean, you got Garrett Wilson is, a fantastic player, but you got, Arian Smith, 4th-round rookie from this past year's draft, who is still developing his route tree. You got a couple of veterans in Josh Reynolds and Alan Lazard who don't always seem like they want to be there. Not to put words in their mouth, but definitely some high upside on the receivers. And, Justin Fields needs some help. Hasn't always been great passing the ball this year, but you can also point to the fact that they don't have a lot of weapons in the passing game to support him with. So one of these guys can pan out would be absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I'd say even especially with the Mechie trade, it's like, you trade Michael Carter, who is decent, and, Philadelphia needed some help at the cornerback position. So it's a fair deal to make. And you probably figured you'd get like just a 6th-round pick and you call it a day. But then you kind of take a flyer on a guy. And I think right now, if there's one thing to, kind of how we spoke about with the draft picks, if the Jets want to take that flyer, you have to do it with young, cheap talent. And that's exactly what he is at this point in his career, in my opinion. So I'm pretty excited about him. I think if the Jets had drafted him, I believe it was actually in 23. So I guess 3 years ago now at this point, we probably would have thought that like this could have been your obvious like WR2 behind Wilson. Is he still that? Maybe not, but he hasn't really gotten a ton of opportunities to be that elsewhere. I mean, he only had 30 targets in 23, 37 in 24, and 4 in Philadelphia this year. So it's not like he's getting a bulk of action. He was averaging 9.8 yards per catch in his career. So there might be something there for him. And I think that kind of brings us into A.D. Mitchell here, who another guy was drafted in the 2nd round last year, or 2 years ago, my apologies, out of Texas on a really good Texas team that was an explosive offense with Quinn Ewers and him and a couple other guys. But just really the lack of, maybe opportunity. I know he had 55 targets and only 23 receptions in 24. Even this year, he had 9 receptions on 16 targets. So maybe not ideal numbers, some drop problems there, but there's speed, there's ability to make big plays, and it's obviously something that the Jets offense has been lacking for a pretty long time.
Yeah, and there's actually there's a clip making the rounds on social media the past day or two, obviously post the Gardner trade, where the Jets and the Colts last season, Mitchell beat Gardner on a touchdown. So that's something Jets fans can hang on to there a little bit before they actually see him play. But yeah, of course, with the Colts receiver room, it's actually we didn't really appreciate it much until this year when that offense was operating at a higher level. But it's fairly deep. You got Pittman, you got Downs. Alec Pierce is one of the good vertical threats in football right now. So it was just kind of a lack of opportunity that led to that. Needing some more time to marinate and kind of come into his own as an NFL receiver. And he's going to get those reps these next 9 games with the Jets because, like we said, just the lack of bodies in the receiver room. He's going to have the opportunity to show and prove himself as a true receiver in the NFL. And what better opportunity than this one, where the only real competition he's got for targets is Garrett Wilson, So,
yeah. And I think, as you kind of said too, with Reynolds and especially Lazard, the Jets know what Lazard is at this point in his career. To me, there's really no point of even having him on the roster. If they could release him, I probably would. So it does really boil down to, in my opinion, of just trying to see what they have over the next, 2 months in the regular season. The year will be done. And I guess that kind of leads into our next point here. And we could probably talk about this for a while. I always say, and I've spoken to guys who play, professional sports, like when you're in a tanking situation, it's very tough to say that these guys being paid millions and millions of dollars want to lose. And, in the NFL, we can even go as far as saying they're legitimately putting their life on the line every down. So you can't go out there essentially trying to lose as a player. And I don't think any player in the NFL would do that because there's just a level of respect to the game. But after yesterday and, the moves the Jets made, it almost feels like, Woody Johnson is really hoping that Aaron Glenn and his team lose, a good amount of games moving forward. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, of course, no NFL team is ever going to be actively trying to lose games. Of course, there may be some, from the top organizational, hey, I hope we, can get a better draft pick here or there. But I mean, these guys, of course, they're playing every week. They know, the tape's going to be out there for their next contract, for their next team, and especially for this Jets roster. There's a lot of guys on, 1-year deals, expiring contracts who are going to be trying to get that next job. So the Jets as a whole, Aaron Glenn, they're definitely trying to win games, trying to establish something here, in year one of this cultural reset to build upon for 2026 and beyond. But saying they're trying to lose outright, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think that's any NFL team. So
yeah, that's kind of where I stand too. I think, maybe if anything, if the Jets still have one win at the end of the year and, the Saints are there, the Dolphins are there, the Titans, I guess you don't have to worry about too much with the Titans outside of, trading that pick, which is a good possibility. Perhaps you see them quietly sit a couple guys saying, Garrett Wilson's banged up and this guy's out, but I don't think it'll be a full on, just go out there and kind of do whatever you want. But I guess it kind of goes back to our last points too, where, as you said, there are a lot of guys on this Jets roster who have a lot to prove. And there's really no better time than now to do it because you'll have a kind of an opportunity to be on a young team now with a lot of, I don't want to say flexibility to do what you want, but you really have a chance to show if you belong in the NFL. And I think for mainly the offense, even if we want to go as far as saying Justin Fields, is really playing for another opportunity to keep playing in the NFL. I don't want to blame all the lack of success on the Jets on Justin Fields, but I don't think it's unfair to say that he hasn't been great this year. But, just all around, I think there's, probably even a lot of the starters outside of maybe a couple of guys like on the defense and Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson really, and, a couple offensive line guys, but there aren't really a ton of guys out there who are like guaranteed NFL starters moving forward. So to your point, it is important for them to continue to go out there. Now, the lack of talent, as we've already seen over the past few years, is going to likely take over, and that's why the Jets keep losing games. And I know it's in a weird spot for the organization, probably where the Jets fan base probably doesn't want to win, but the players do, and that always brings strange feelings towards players. And in typical Jets fashion, I could totally see them having one win and maybe beat the Saints or something, and then all of a sudden they get the second pick, and they don't want the quarterback that they get, and we look back in 10 years and Mendoza's like Drew Brees and Dante Moore's like Tua, and you're just like, well, typical Jet stuff here. So it'll be interesting. I say all that just to kind of say, the Jets have a lot to consider. But to our points, I don't think they'll go out there just trying to lose games.
Yeah, but and to what you just said, I think it got reported within the last hour or so that Quincy Williams, who's the former All-Pro linebacker, was dangled in some trade chatter this week. He got benched, and yep. I don't know if that's necessarily because of his play or they just want to get a look at some of the young linebackers they picked up this past year. But, yeah, things like that make you go, oh, they're not trying to lose, but they're trying to get a look at some of the young guys and see if they fit for the future of the franchise.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I know there's a lack of talent, and even some of the veteran guys like Quincy, he's good. I know he's struggled a little bit the past year and a half, 2 years. But you really the ultimate thing for the Jets here is like trying to find as many good players as possible. I think that fit what they're looking for, and just kind of move on from there. And as we'll go on to this next part here. One of the maybe under the radar pieces that the Jets landed on Tuesday was that pick from the Colts. I know they have their first round pick in 26, but they also got the one in 27. Now we look at the Colts this year, and they're playing pretty well at 7-2. I think I might even go as far as saying that I'm pretty sure the Colts had like the third highest odds and that third shortest odds in that AFC South to finish last. People thought this was a potential last place team coming into the year, maybe outside of, a brutal Titans team, and they kind of shock you. And I bring up that pick in particular because you already know the 26 pick isn't really much unless they lose every game from here on out. But even at that point, it's still going to be in the teens. And I say it nicely for maybe some Giants fans who could be listening that like Daniel Jones, but how much trust can we really put into Daniel Jones to go into next year and say, you know what, there's no chance this Colts pick can be, a top 10 pick? Because I think there's a possibility for it. And he kind of showed it on Sunday against the Steelers. I saw some tweets and, they're memes, but there's some truth behind it. He has that look on his face where things just get tough and he starts turning the ball over. I mean, 3 interceptions. It was ugly. And the Steelers defense, my apologies, is one of the worst in football coming into that week. So 6 takeaways in general, three interceptions and 3 fumbles. So.
Yeah. I mean, what do they like to say, John? History repeats itself. And, this same, I don't want to call it the same exact situation, but Daniel Jones entering a contract year, balls out, leading one of the top offenses in football. Gets a big contract from his team. In 2022's case, Daniel Jones got that contract from the Giants. He could get that from the Colts this offseason. And then he turned back into a pumpkin, and he showed, what he was before that first year with Brian Daboll and company. And, I'm not rooting against Daniel Jones here. I would like to see him succeed. You feel bad for him because he's been dealt a tough hand in the NFL, but he could turn back into a pumpkin again. It could totally happen. It's not out of the realm of possibilities. So, yeah, that 2027 Colts pick, I mean, they got Sauce Gardner. That defense is going to be good, probably. They got a good coach in Steichen, I believe. But, yeah, Daniel Jones, he could mess that whole thing up, so you never know.
And you really even maybe look beyond that, too. Like, if Jones were to get hurt, I mean, you're going to give, a starting opportunity back, to someone who hasn't really done a lot. And then you go further down the list. If they don't want to give him that shot, you give it to Riley Leonard. And it's like, what can I really sit here and say? And again, I try to be nice, but Anthony Richardson and Riley Leonard, Richardson never showed much, and Leonard hasn't played a snap, if I'm not mistaken, this year, or very limited. So there's really not a lot to look at and say, well, they're not the Chiefs by any, stretch of the imagination, as I'm trying to say here. I wouldn't pencil them in for 9 to 10 wins next year. If they did it, I wouldn't be shocked. But I don't think Indianapolis is maybe as good as they've played. The one downside, I guess, for that pick is the fact that they are in the AFC South. I'm not big on the Jaguars, Titans. The Jaguars have impressed at times this year. The Texans, my apologies, can be good with Stroud, but over the past couple years, even at this point, probably last 2 years, honestly, since that Jets game, I believe his rookie year, he really hasn't done much. It seems like the Jets kind of figured him out, and the rest of the league did beyond that. So that's something to factor in. But if the Colts finish in first place, they're also going to have to play some first place teams around the league. So it'll be interesting to see. But I guess we can kind of stick on our topic here of winning and losing and just kind of close out here over the next 5 minutes on if the Jets can get another win at the back end of the season. So they'll take on the Browns this Sunday in New York, or at MetLife in East Rutherford. They'll play the Patriots. They got the Ravens on the road, Falcons at home, Dolphins at home, who are beatable, Jaguars on the road, Saints on the road, Patriots, and then Bills on the road. So as you kind of look ahead for the Jets, do you think there's a chance for them to win this weekend against the Browns? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, if you look back at recent Jets history or even go back, 20, 30 years, history says that they'll beat the Browns, they'll beat the Saints, and they'll end up with, the fifth or sixth pick and just be on the outside of that quarterback, like perfect spot. But I mean, yeah, you subtract Sauce, you subtract Quinnen from an already bottom five defense. It's going to be rough. The offense will be roughly about the same. It's fairly boom or bust with Justin Fields. This Jets team to me seems more like a 4 or 5 win team to finish the season. I know they only have the one right now, but that back half of the schedule, anything can happen in divisional games. The Patriots are great right now, but I could totally imagine them catching them flat-footed one of those 2 games. The Dolphins, of course, have looked rough, and then, like you mentioned, the Browns and Saints also vying for a top pick as well. So I see at least maybe 2-3 wins the rest of the way for the Jets potentially.
Yeah, I think as you look at the schedule, there are 3 games you really have to almost circle. And again, I say it as nice as I can, but for Jets fans, you probably want to lose them because you don't want the Browns to select ahead of you because you have to assume, even though they just drafted Shedeur and Gabriel and have Watson under contract, although I'd say probably after this offseason, they try to just let him go and deal with the cap hit. But you have to assume they'll take a quarterback. The Patriots and Ravens, have their guy. The Falcons are a little probably in the middle there. I don't know how I feel about Penix, but I don't think the Jets will beat them just off the sheer fact that even if Penix can just be average, the rest of the offense is good enough with Bijan and Drake London to kind of just beat the Jets. So we'll have to see on that front. The Dolphins probably in a similar boat with the Browns with Watson and Tua where, he's not the guy. I think they both found that out the hard way. As crazy as it might sound, the Dolphins actually are probably in a better spot than the Browns with Tua. Just because of what they didn't have to give up to get him like the Browns did in the deal with the Texans. And I could totally see the Dolphins trying to cut ties with Tua at the end of the year too, especially if they fire McDaniel, new coach, new GM want to come in and after already firing Chris Grier. So that's a game the Jets have to worry about. The Dolphins did beat them earlier in the year, one of their 2 wins. Jaguars have their guy in Trevor Lawrence. Saints just let a show come in and kind of be their starter. Patriots and Bills, so you don't have to worry about them. So as you look ahead here, there's probably 3 games remaining for the Jets that are as important as maybe any other in franchise history. I don't want to say, but over the past decade or so, outside of Mark Sanchez days when they actually could make the postseason, these are really important games. I think the Browns game this weekend, we can just talk about this for a little bit for 2 minutes here. The Browns are pretty bad at 2-6, and I get how poor the offense is. Just being honest, and Gabriel doesn't look good. Dylan Gabriel probably isn't the guy, but they have just such a lack of weapons around him outside of really Njoku and decent run game. But wide receiver wise, there's not a lot to write home about. So I don't know how much we can put on Gabriel, but the defense is really good. Even against some of the better teams in the league, it's not like they're getting really blown out. I know they got killed by the Ravens and Lions, but the defense is definitely good enough to slow down the Jets is what I'm saying here. And my question for the Jets defense now with how bad it's been and, after moving on from Sauce and Quinnen is if there's really any possibility for their offense to score some points and maybe just even keep up. So I don't think it'll happen, but curious to hear your thoughts here for the last minute or so.
Yeah, no, I mean, kind of like what you're saying, it's almost like it kind of cancels each other out, right? Like the Browns' amazing defense versus the Jets' mediocre offense, and then you got a mediocre Browns offense versus a somewhat mediocre Jets defense. The forecast on Sunday is looking a little wet and rainy in northern New Jersey, so it's looking like it might be just an ugly 9-6 game maybe. That's just me spitballing from here a couple days out, but that one probably won't be in the rotation on Red Zone too much this Sunday.
Yeah, I think that's probably a game you see the Browns give Judkins the ball a good bit, and whatever happens from that point, you kind of live with it. And I don't know if I can trust the Jets defense at this point to slow them down, but we'll find out on Sunday, and we'll talk about it a little bit next Wednesday. But I appreciate everybody. This is the Jets Roundtable podcast, and if you have any questions, please comment below and let us know. Thanks.